I guess you was, yeah.
All right, we're gonna get going.
I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'm standing in for our president, Stephanie Burnett, who is online, but is out of town right now. And hopefully not. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Can you hear us, Stephanie?
She's very frozen.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and then I want to establish the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Are we having a work report tonight?
No.
No. Okay. Do I have a second or a motion to establish the agenda?
Motion to establish the agenda.
A second. Julian moved and
then take a look.
Christina second. Vote. Student. Board members.
Aye.
I'm going to assume Stephanie is an aye. Yeah. Okay. So the purpose of this session is to conduct linkage session with the Mercer Island Educational Association, MIEA, and the PTA Council. First, we're going to discuss topics of mutual interest and take action on the annual superintendent summary evaluation, which we will be doing at the end of this meeting. So first, we're going to meet with our partners in education and the Mercer Island Educational Association, and hear from them about their priorities and help us set priorities for the district for the coming year. It's an opportunity for us to hear from each other and have, as the title would suggest, our linkage. So I'm going to hand this over to, I'm assuming, Sally.
Super. I just first want to thank you for inviting MIEA to the table. We find linkage to be very important. We loved it a lot more when it used to involve dinner and a little bit more. We truly appreciate this opportunity to open dialogue and hope this is one of many meaningful conversations between district and association leadership. For those who are new to the board, MIEA represents the majority of Mercer Island School District employees. We're proud to be a wall-to-wall union, which is unusual within our state. We represent both classified staff, that's our custodians, bus drivers, para-educators, office professionals, technology specialists, security, coaches, and more. And also our certificated staff, which includes our teachers, our nurses, our counselors, psychologists, SLPs, instructional coaches, and many more in that category. Together, we are united in our commitment to supporting students and serving this community. Our members are navigating significant challenges: continued state underfunding of public education, a high cost of living in our region, and a broader political climate that impacts our schools and professions. These pressures contribute to increasing educator stress, burnout, and turnover. Today, we seek partnership. We want to better understand district priorities, resource allocation, and decision making, and to work collaboratively to find solutions. Our students deserve fully funded schools, and our educators deserve wages that allow them to live in or near this community that we all serve. We hope you will join us today and support sustainable school funding at the state level, including SB 6346, the millionaire's tax. Despite assumptions about district wealth, Mercer Island is not immune to financial strain. Recent budget challenges have led to difficult reductions, including cuts to nurses and librarians. Across Washington, districts are forced to make similar decisions because the state has not fully funded basic education, special education, and materials, supplies, and operating costs. The millionaire's tax would apply to approximately 0.2% of the wealthiest Washingtonians and generate an estimated $3.5 billion annually for schools and other essential public services. It would also help rebalance a tax structure in which working families pay a significantly higher percentage of their income than the wealthiest residents. There is great concern it may not pass the House. If it doesn't, funding will be even worse in the years to come. The current budget put out this week is looking extremely bleak for K through 12. A failure to pass the bill would only exacerbate a decrease in funding for years to come. We know our community values strong public schools. We ask you to stand with educators, students, and families by supporting efforts to secure stable, equitable funding for public education. It is our hope that you will join us in taking a picture with us today to send to one of our representatives tonight and reach out to other legislators and let them know you want them to vote in favor of SB 6346. Thank you for your time, for your partnership, and we look forward to sharing our questions and ideas this evening and hearing your responses.
Good evening. I'm Danielle. I'm a para at Northwood. I'm also a co-VP of the union, and we'll introduce ourselves as we start going along. Thank you again for this opportunity. And regarding funding, so MIEA leadership appreciates very much the partnership. We worked with MISD last year on policy development to protect our students and educators from the U.S. immigration and customs enforcement in our schools. Moving forward, MIEA would like to partner again with MISD and encourage you to join WISE, and it stands for Washington Investing in Schools and Education. It's a 501c4 organization advocating for simple, majority to pass school bonds in Washington state. If MISD and our school board are already involved, what is the nature of that involvement? And I sent the information forward so that can be passed for you for a later discussion as well. WISE is a statewide coalition of parents, business leaders, school communities, school boards, parent organizations, and also faith-based partners to modernize our school board system and our voting and our bond requirements. Currently, local school construction bonds must pass, as you know, with a supermajority of 60%. So this grassroots organization wants to lower that threshold for a simple majority for 50%. Generally, our bonds would pass at that, and our last bond would pass. As a district that values strong public education and community voice, we encourage the board to consider supporting WISE's efforts. They also have endorsements on their website, so you can look to see what school boards have already, and as well as our PTA, our Mercer Island PTA Council. So aligning this work will help ensure that local voters can make timely decisions on critical school infrastructure and long-term investments in our schools' learning environments. So that information will be forwarded out to you so you can check out their website as well, discuss with the board.
And we did check, we don't see that our school board is actually signed on to WISE, so our hope is that you'll take the time, as we've done in the past, and read the flyers that we're providing to you in the information, and consider that we had a very successful partnership in creating policy around what's going on with immigration enforcement in our country. We're hoping that this also will be a partnership that we can build with you. We currently are supporting WISE, so is our UNICEF Council and our. So the question to you at this point is, are you involved yet?
So I will talk a little bit about the WISE. I think that during the town hall, that was one of the priorities that was put forward, because I think that every student deserves a modern facility to learn and thrive. So that was one of our priorities during the town hall, advocating for lower the passing threshold for the bond. And I think that we still feel that way. I don't know if the board thinks that way, but I think we do feel that this needs to be addressed at state level, because there's no other way that we will be able to ever modernize the whole school district that we have without support from the legislators. And I think that people and the community members also need to understand that this is the only way to modernize facilities where the kids for the next 50 years will study, and we need to do that. So
I'll add on a little bit to what Christina said. I would certainly be in favor of endorsing and signing onto WISE. I do think that there is a fundamental unfairness in a super majority to pass bonds where a no vote is worth approximately 20% more than a yes vote. And, those are the types of things that we can talk to our legislators about.
Yeah, I mean, we can't do it at this meeting, like you would have to get another meeting because we would have to notice it, but I also am very much in favor of signing on to it. It in addition to the different weighting of the votes that you discussed, it just seems so arbitrary. Like why couldn't someone set the level for like public security bonds at 90%, to pass, right? Like that, like it just 50% is passing. Unless you're in class, in which case I think it's like 60%. This leaves you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds great. Like, and we need modern schools. I mean, you all know you're in the schools every day. So anything we can do to make sure we can get modern schools, I think we should.
And I know that this is something that we've long supported, just having the bond level down to 50%. When I was ledge director with Christina a year or so ago, this is something that was in front of us and that we pushed for actively. And so of course we would, want to talk more as many times as we can do it here, but we would want to talk more about like getting behind an effort like this.
And Fred, is this something you think the district can get behind in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had conversations around this. I would add the board and the senator and 2 representatives from the 41st had this conversation at their linkage before they headed off to Olympia. I don't know if it's accurate or whatnot. They did share that they don't believe that they have the votes right now between, because it sounds like they would need some potential people coming from across the aisle to join them in order to do this because of the constitutional nature of it. And then of course it would have to go to the vote of the people. Now, that being said, maybe that's why all the more reason for something like this, right? Is so that how do you build coalitions?
Right.
When I look at the list of who has, signed on, we've got I-5 corridor and a little bit out on the peninsula covered. And the more we can get both east, west, north, and south, the better, obviously. And so it's not something that we have not brought up with legislators either when I've been meeting with them over the summers. We'll see where it goes eventually, and whether or not they will get the votes or what that's going to take. But that's kind of over, some conversations that I'm thinking.
I'll add
Thank you. Yeah. So I was going to say, I think this is something that I'm interested in, certainly, but I do want to, I appreciate that you'll send, the materials and more information about it. I'd just like to look into it a little bit more before I say one way or another. I mean, obviously we want to figure out how to get these bonds passed 100%, right? So I just want to make sure I understand fully what the organization is and look into it before saying for sure one way or another.
Okay, you can also, just so you all know, they are online. If you just type in WISE, Washburn State, bond, lowering, like there's lots of different ways to get to it. So,
And adding to, and I show, Julian was first. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to bring people's attention to House Bill 1796. I spent my week down in Olympia last week. And so I was at the Senate K-12 Education Committee when Lake Washington Superintendent John Holman presented it. And that is a House bill about bonding cap tech levies. And for a school district like Lake Washington, and this is, he said that for them, the market rate to build an elementary school is $85 million. Their cap tech levy over 4 years is $250 million. Our cap tech levy over 6 years is just under $50 million. So, right, like bonding a cap tech levy doesn't move the needle for us in a way that it does for larger districts. And those are the kinds of things that are moving in Olympia that, yes, are good for some districts, but just don't really move the needle for us on Mercer Island. So there is work going on around this, but it isn't helpful to us.
Yeah, and our thought just is if we continue to build coalitions and those grow and snowball, then maybe we have a bigger
Yeah.
voice to raise and get action a little faster. That's what we all say.
And I think that the partnership that we made, like during the council, right, that we, so, I don't know, finding a way to make a coalition like that for, but, on the smaller district on the east side, those are the goals that the legislators need, and I think that also those are the communities that also will not benefit also from that, just like us. And, are also in a big need of modernizing their school district, so maybe we can figure out a way to make something like we did with the
Yeah, so
others. And-
we are Washington Education Association, and it is the whole state, and all of us are working on trying to find funding.
Are you here, I'm more locked, I don't even live in the 41st, but I'm more locked into the 41st than I am the 5th where I am. So, shame on me. But are you hearing, as you're talking to others, that there is that similar sentiment that we're going to need more votes for this? Or is that a conversation coming up as you're talking across districts? I have not had that
What you heard
conversation.
actually is similar to what we're hearing,
Okay,
which is that there's interest. But so there's some people dragging their feet on, and this is not gonna be easy, and I think everybody's aware of that, and I think WISE is very aware of that. What we heard in our meeting when we were presented this as a coalition was they aren't thinking things are gonna happen this year. They're looking towards the future to build this coalition. So
absolutely.
we're the ground roots, just like we were when we brought in, the whole, let's deal with creating policy around what's happening with immigration.
Yeah.
Like we were really the start of a movement. Let's be the start of a movement.
Yeah, and I asked that because we also obviously have midterms coming up.
Yeah.
And in those elections, that could have,
Yeah.
that could help this.
All right. I'm Alice Larkin. I'm from IMS. And I teach 6th grade language arts and drama. So my questions are around academic plans, inclusion, and retention. So as inclusionary practices and programs expand, what is the district's plan to adequately fund training, staffing, and in-class support to ensure successful implementation? So that's one question. How will MISD strengthen recruitment and retention efforts, particularly for special education teachers, substitutes, paraeducators, and other hard-to-fill positions without having to rely on expensive agencies that impact our MIE membership? So I'm going to start with those two questions. I have a few more in that same area, but I wanted to break them down a little bit.
If you want to lean on me, that's fine. If you want to take it too, that's fine. I can kind of just kick it off. You know what? I think we're going to hear from our partners in the PTA some requests to accelerate things that we're doing maybe in one school, but not another, particularly in our elementaries. And I think why I'm answering it in this way is trying to be really deliberate about how we're doing it. So we're doing it right. So if we're building access classrooms, instead of just rolling that out across all schools and hoping, I think the strategy has been, let's start with a few and let's see what's working. We've depended heavily on our schools foundation to help fund extra paras for that. And those are things we're going to have to continue to look at as we're thinking about some of these models. So it is, I think from a rollout standpoint, it's trying not to do too much too quickly, but also realizing we have to continue to make steps either to get to the 2028, I believe, piece around how we're going to identify students for special services. So that's how I kind of start off with that is it can't just happen overnight. And I know that we've tried some of those initiatives in my 17 years in the districts, and they don't tend to do so well. And because you can't financially support them, you also heavily burden staff, and the change process just takes a toll. So, yeah.
In terms of professional development, I know we've leaned heavily on our community partners, specifically Schools Foundation, as well as the PTAs have paid for a good bit of professional development the last couple of years. And I anticipate at least for next year. Hopefully that can continue. The levy starts to kick in at the end of next year. As everyone knows, we are in a tight spot financially with a fund balance of approximately 4%, where the state wants us to be at 8%. And so we're just going to have to balance how we invest in the schools, how we continue to grow our fund balance.
And the second part, further, we know we have lost a high number of special education professionals the last several years. How does the district work to better understand why it struggles to retain special education professionals, and how can we learn from these struggles?
I don't know if HR wants to kind of go with some of that. I'd just kick it off with saying, similar to principals and some of the hard to fill positions, it's also trying to attract people into wanting to do those positions. And then how do we build? A lot of them come into the profession, not just in our district, but in many of the districts, through, they're paraeducators, and then they are emergency certified, and that's a tough way to enter in as well. And so trying to figure out how do we get more educators in our universities wanting to, get into the roles and then support them. But I'll kick it over to you all.
Wait, sorry for picking.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Stephanie.
Stephanie, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think I think it's a great question and something that, I hope is being considered. But I'm curious for the union reps, do you have any suggestions about how the district could better retain special education parapros and teachers?
What our members are telling us is that communication is a real problem, and that changes are rolling out and people don't understand the changes that are coming, and they don't feel appropriately trained for those changes. That programs have been adopted, such as Access for Reading, that have stressed both the general education classroom teachers and the special education teachers, and under stress, we're creating conflict, which is really hard on our members. So what we're looking for is a partnership. WEA has all kinds of trainings around inclusionary practices. Those trainings are free for all of our members. And we've been trying to partner with the district for a long time around this, of just, hey, we can get people trained so that they feel comfortable when they are in a classroom that is being heavily impacted by higher needs in certain areas. Our district is giving 90 minutes of support during Access for Reading, but then that support goes away, but the same class is still there with the same needs. And that is very difficult. It's difficult also because we don't have maybe as many special services staff to come in and help when there's struggles. So I think one of our suggestions is, again, we need better communication about what is coming. We need better training in order to deal with what is coming. If those things happen, we can partner. If they just drop in our laps, which is what happened this year, we struggle. And people get stressed out, and special education teachers leave. And that's what we're seeing a lot of. We're seeing a lot of people sliding away. They just cannot continue in the level of stress they feel themselves to be in. They're getting pulled in every possible direction. But do you want to add? You're kind of really for some of the experience.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Ogle. I've been in the district for 8 years. I taught special ed for 7, and I'm a first grade teacher this year. A piece I was going to add on to say is even the demands of the change, given their planning and preparation. Currently, it's challenging to answer all the asks within that given amount of time, on top of being the leader in every individualized education plan meeting and all the other requirements that come with that job. And does the district understand what that looks like for our teachers every day in that job position?
So does that mean that the access for all classes, that the teachers have a greater workload than other teachers?
Potentially, yeah. It's a different kind of workload. It may not be greater, but it might be different. It might have different structure to it, needs to it, the need for more partnerships. You're collaborating with another professional. You need to talk about what those IEP plans involve. You need to make sure you're coordinating whatever help comes in. So yeah, you may or may not call it more, but you definitely need more time to collaborate. I guess that's the best way to say it.
Just before we go back to the boards, the HR was gonna weigh in with the retention and retraction of special ed teachers, or do you want to let hear from the boards first?
I'm happy to weigh in, and Erin may weigh in as well. I'm welcome you to join, but it's sort of it's a national and both statewide issue. Special education typically the highest need area in districts, and it's also the area with the highest turnover. That's related often to the fact that there's a lot of legal complexity with it. There's compliance issues, and just there can be different stressors associated with the job. That's particularly true in the first 1 to 3 years. That's when you see nationally and also in our state, we are not unique, the trend of people starting special education and then pulling away. One of the things that I think we try very hard to do is provide supports, especially in those initial years, to our special education teachers in terms of learning and how to make sure they have access to other people, their colleagues and administrators in some of those harder to manage meetings, because there is a complexity when you're the lead, and there's lots of questions, especially when you're on what's the legal parameter am I working on? We're continually trying to improve our systems as well, because if you have efficiencies in your system, that can take some of the workload off. Is there room for improvement? Yes. And that's something that we continue to try to do, while still providing very good service and trying to listen to our staff and meet the needs, because ultimately without them, we can't serve our kids. And I am proud of our staff. I think we have very qualified and passionate educators who really believe in the work, and that's to their credit. And my belief, having interacted with many others, is we're actually more successful than many districts in terms of recruitment and retention. We fill our positions where other districts don't. But at the same time, we have a lower end just because we're a smaller system. And that doesn't mean we want to say, oh, we're better and therefore there's nothing for us to do. There's still room for improvement. And that's, I think, is just continue to work through the partnership, addressing like communications. I know that we do work pretty collaboratively with MIEA and try to address issues and be proactive. And so I think that sort of sums up where we are.
Nothing to add, no.
I'm gonna Julian and Maggie Ty and then Stephanie again. And did you?
Aaron touched on this. I mean, I know that this is an issue across districts, across the state and the country. Is there anything specific that we could be doing better from the?
We had a conversation over the summer with our special education directors, in which we were told there were no major changes coming down the pipe. And so we didn't have an opportunity to work with our members to prepare for an increase in inclusion, particularly in our high school. We would love actually to spend time in a format other than this, which is incredibly rushed, to talk about the results of not having clear communication moving into the school year. We just cannot we have a lot of other things to cover in this little bit of an hour that we have, but we'd love to be in conversation with you around that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yep. This is just, Elizabeth, you were mentioning teachers having the burden of like running all of those IEP meetings. Is there an alternate model where the teachers wouldn't have to, like, is there like a case manager model or some other model where someone else has to run the meetings?
There's definitely a variety of models. There's also a lot of other structures and systems that could be set up for them to occur during a contracted workday. And I think that would be in favor of a need for our members.
So they're normally happening like after school or before
Correct.
school?
Correct.
Both. Okay. Thanks. Stephanie?
I want to respect that Sally's comment that there's a lot to get to. So I just would say that around these topics, I love the idea of continuing collaboration and, you know, talking about what we could do to support these kinds of efforts. And so, but I think I'd like to hear what else, you know, all else you have to say tonight.
Yeah, and just to summarize, you asked us what our thoughts would be, and our thoughts are teachers need more time in order to collaborate. They need more training in order to figure out how to do the things they're being asked to do. Collaboration is a massive way to support people. We don't have enough planning time. We just don't. And planning time is also collaboration time. We all want to be super successful. We want to include everybody that's here as a student in our district in a positive way. The way to do that is to make sure that we're communicating with each other. But, you know, with our paraeducators, for example, we're talking about 15 minutes. That's it. That's all we have. And they're supposed to be running small success blocks in our elementary schools on a 15-minute time for teachers that they may be doing a success block. There just isn't enough time.
And as you move on, you know, I think I can't help but link the first conversation or the first part of this conversation, your opening statements to that.
Yeah.
Around, you know, what is the prototypical school model, as Danielle and I, as we were talking just as the meeting was getting going, you know, and what is the, you know, overall commitment of resources from our state or whatnot to help pay for some of this time.
And I just want to add one point of clarity, and it's not that anyone intentionally spoke, but just for the audience at large, because we have had questions over time. If your student's participating in Success Block, that's an elementary activity largely at this point in time, and it is not special education. So just
Correct.
You're in a Success Block, that is not a special education class. And
Most of our elementary children are involved with success blocks of one kind or another. They have lots of different names, but it's just small groups.
Yeah, so wolf
that
pack
they're
for
working
those
with.
four
Yeah.
members. So
Yeah.
I just
Thank
want
you
to
for
be
the
clear,
clarification.
just so that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Zen.
Hi, I'm Zen. I'm a second grade teacher at West Mercer. At a recent board meeting, data highlighted the lack of diversity among MISD staff. MIEA educators are concerned that the district is not prioritizing the hiring and retention of diverse staff, particularly in a district with a growing diverse student body. What is the district's comprehensive plan to address this gap, including intentional recruitment and retention strategies for BIPOC and other underrepresented professionals? That's the first part of it. So, and then I'll ask the second part afterwards.
Well, I know that we.
I think
talk
the
about
board
this
needs
every
to
time it
go
comes up
first, yeah.
in front of us. It's something that we're interested in as well. Do you want to quickly recap what you tell us every time?
Yeah, generally. So I think maybe we are required to have a workforce, we call it a workforce diversification program, which it's a slightly different name depending on which district you are, but it is something where we actively monitor our success or lack thereof in terms of increasing the representation of those of people who come from historically underrepresented backgrounds. So that's BIPOC often, but there's also other categories. The reality is that we recognize that it's very hard, especially amongst our certificated staff ranks, to have parity or anything even remotely close to that between what our students look like and what our staff look like when you have such a small N of people of color, BIPOC, who hold a certificate, which is one of the reasons why we have focused on trying to, within our means as a small district, to grow your own. Again, that's why we've had the greatest success, because we actually, our most successful way of bringing in people to different backgrounds to our organization is through our classified ranks. And so if we can get someone who's already performing, very happy, and loves our kids, and then can convert them into a certificated staff member through access to education, et cetera, that's been a success for us. We do monitor why people leave, and why that's a struggle. And we do hear there's a perception that our educators of color are disproportionately leaving, and that may be, there may be some truth to that, but it may not be because of something that the system is overtly doing. There's many different reasons why people leave, and we've also been in a period where we have been in attrition in terms of staffing, and unfortunately, at least in our initial rounds of reductions, some of our newer staff were also the people we work really hard to get who are people of color, but we have differences, and that's not to blame any system, that just is where it is. In terms of intentionality, we focused our recruitment efforts. We on historically black colleges, we go to minority fairs, or we have, but when we are not hiring a lot of people because we are in a reduction, that again is harder to change the makeup. The other thing is, one of the things we focus on is attraction and retention. We actually are very good at retaining staff. So in order to bring in new staff who are of a different background, we have to have existing staff go. And Aaron Miller, we're both Aaron, so that's probably confusing. But Aaron Miller and I were just talking today. I mean, we have a very small end of people who are leaving this year. We at least have indicated they're leaving at the end of the year. And so that only opens up a small end to try to bring in and attract diverse candidates. But we are intentional in terms of also looking at our questions. So to ensure that we're looking for people who would be allies and who have cultural sensitivity, because that's important for educating our kids. We want a positive environment for kids of all backgrounds, even if we can't reflect what their backgrounds are exactly. We want an appreciation for that. And we don't ask things that obviously that would prevent people to screen people out based on anything that would be discriminatory. But that's what we try to do. And right now, and you know this because you're from West Mercer, and then I'm also part of the team, is working with the ESD on exercises really geared toward recruitment and retention, where there's a handful of districts who are working to try to address this problem. It's cultivating leadership communities for people of color. Because the idea is that one of the ways you attract and retain people, regardless of background, but also people of color, is that you have opportunities for them to first come in, but then really feel the leadership roles and be more than just a therapist. So that's something that we're doing. And I also am proud of the work at all of the schools, that there's dedicated, they have different names, but groups that work on this type of work within their school for their students, but typically it also touches staff and that helps with our retention. I don't know if that answers the question.
We have a little more than 20 minutes left. I just wanted to make sure that we're
Yeah. And then it's just additionally what partnerships and professional development efforts are being prioritized to advance employee knowledge base in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And specifically, is the district willing to partner with Washington Education Association and the Sammamish Uniserve Council to provide equity training that offers clock hours and supports CCDEI, cultural competency, diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements for certificated staff recertification.
So
I'll just jump in and say, we've done that in the past and we would certainly do it. Ben Abale, is he still working
Ben still works.
with their,
However, there are so many more people than Ben, and
as an illustration of some partnerships we've had, and there's certainly more opportunity for that as well. We still have our equity advisory, council for the superintendent. The schools, I think some of the feedback I've heard is it's also been hard to, because of how much is on everyone's plate, to have people want to even be on some of our committees, not just this committee, lots of committees, because before and after school is already busy. So there's also a press on time. And so happy to partner on ideas to bring people to the table.
We would love to see that when we are in trainings as a membership, that the district makes sure those trainings provide us with clock hours. We don't make huge salaries, contrary to what some people think, and paying for clock hours is a real problem for a lot of our members. It was our hope that in a lot of the negotiations we've had, that providing clock hours was one of the benefits of our working in this district. And we just had an equity training that didn't provide us with clock hours. And that's a big problem for our members because we need 15 clock hours in equity in order to recertify.
And
So,
look, I mean, our administrators have those clock hours too, or whatnot. I think we've been a heavy clock hour provider.
mhm,
That comes at a cost
mhm.
of time and at an administrative cost. And as we are losing enrollment and we're going to lose that support, that's going to be a challenge, just honestly, on how do
So
we.
here's what our solution to that is. It is free for us as members to go to trainings. If we're members of MIEA.
Yep.
We're members of WEA and NEA. They offer equity training, a lot of them. They offer STEM training. Help us help you.
Yeah. Great.
All right, it's on the mine. This is the last one that we have. So this one is about staffing and potential rift that may be coming up. As we've been watching and the student FTE is declining, there's a possibility of a reduction in force as it's being discussed. We would like to know if you can share how the district is evaluating the overall staffing levels, including administrative positions. How does MISD administrative staffing compare to similar districts of similar sizes? And how would staffing decisions be prioritized if a RIF does become necessary? What we really would like to know is what will the school board do to ensure that MISD is not top heavy and is prioritizing spending that keeps educators who spend the most time daily directly serving our students employed in our district. So that's our question for you, the board, as you're looking over these potential risks.
So I can say that this is a conversation that we're gonna have to start having. These are never easy conversations to have at all. For myself, I believe that it is important that the students are the least impacted.
Yeah.
And also I recognize that without the other support or training on the other side, then we sacrifice the future on, so it has to be a balance. And that's a balance that we're gonna have to be in the table and have a conversation, all of us, and see what will be the best for the students, current students and future students as we go through this moment in time. Because this is the reality of our district and
And the reality of the state. I mean, it's not at all, it's a universal or statewide, at least, issue of this lack of, the just enrollment dropping everywhere and
Well,
budgets.
And I'll put some numbers to what Jody's saying that, if our enrollment goes down 120, 150 kids as we're projecting, that's, $1.5 million we have to come up with. At a state level, I think they're projecting 8,000 students. That's $100 million. And so, as a parent, I'll speak to this, but the Washington State PTA has chosen not to endorse Senate Bill 6346 because growth in the general fund has not been translating into growth in funding for education. There are not dedicated funding streams for education, and there is starting to be a push to dedicate the funding streams to education. That when the state says, like the state will have in its budget for next year, an extra $100 million that was allocated to education that is not going to education because of the decrease in enrollment. And it would be very helpful for all of us in this room to have dedicated funding streams for enrollment so that the money that has been collected and earmarked for education actually does go to education.
And I think to break that into our tax our pie charts. You know, when we shifted to McCleary and we shifted to roughly a third of our taxes that go to public ed, I think what PTA and others are saying is, so where is all that money going? Because it's not coming back proportionally back to education. And so as we look at that, you know, that's where people are wondering, where is the money going that was supposed to go to education? As we see from 50% to 47% to 44% to 43% of the state budget, you know, we've dropped since the height of McCleary.
I think I just would like to redirect. It's not our intention to say that there isn't a funding crisis. There is a funding crisis in Washington State when it comes to education. We understand that. And we understand that the influx of money coming into our district is an issue. Our concern is more when we're looking at these prototypical models, and we're looking at prototypical model for the staffing of the people who are sitting at the table. We're also looking at the prototypical model for the administrative staff, because when we're looking at bottom lines, there is a significant difference between the bottom line of paraeducators versus cutting off of the prototypical model from the top end as well. And we're wondering if you are looking at something similar to what we have been looking at as well when it comes to that.
And to just add a little financial clarity to that, we're talking about a salary of $140,000 versus $40,000 a year. So we could put 4 paras into our schools or 1 administrator. And we're just hoping that the school board is thinking carefully about what the priorities actually are and who has the most impact with a student directly every single day. Correct.
Especially when we're talking about moving forward, things such as access programs or our special education inclusion. It's really important that we have more people in the classrooms working with these kiddos. That's the highest impact that we can.
I just wanted to say that is something that the board is cognizant of, is aware of, and pushes on. Like every year when we're having these discussions, we're always looking. And in the past, we have experienced like the board pushing back and saying, we really need to look at cutting more from the administration, and it has happened. So that is something that is on our minds, that we're thinking of. But at the same time, there's this balancing act, because, you know, we've just been hearing from you guys tonight about, you know, gaps in communication, and that you'd like to be, you know, for more to be communicated to the staff about what challenges they're going to be facing in an upcoming year, right? Like you got to have somebody with the capacity to be doing that more proactive communication. You know, like there's just, you know, you want to minimize the impact on students, but you also want to minimize the impact on staff. Like you don't want to go so heavy on just the direct, like who's in the classroom, like per ratio per student or whatever, like teacher per student or para per student. And that to the point that you lose like all of your, you know, support and coaching and what you need a little bit higher up. So it's just kind of always this like very delicate juggling act where we like don't have quite all the weights that we need to have to make it all balanced out, right? You know, so.
And I guess what our members would like to respond to that is, it sounds like Access for Reading is going to be a very popular program. That program won't work if we don't have enough staff.
Yeah.
It just won't work. And it's burning people out.
Yeah.
So if we want that program to work, our school district needs to look really, really carefully at prioritizing where they're spending their money. You need more staff in your schools to run that program.
Right. And which is great for us to hear.
Yeah.
That's all.
And I don't want to get out in front of our superintendent, but at least in his communications to us, it sounds like there will potentially be less administrators at the high school and middle school level.
That's what we're moving towards. I mean, we saw it first at the elementaries as the decrease was happening. Now we're seeing the middle school. I had a very poignant question from one of the middle school staff members when I was down there talking about the search of a new principal. You know, I think concern around less administrative staff and what's the impact at a school there. We're having to really think about how does this building support schools in unique and different ways. We do that with constantly when we have an administrator out who can cover a building. We've had conversations, Sally, you and I, about what does it mean to have an administrator in the building versus just on call, and trying to balance that with the other priorities. So definitely on my mind as we're thinking about the future.
We didn't take a sec to just introduce everybody that's at the table, which is totally my fault. And I just want to make sure that you know who we are when we come to you as MIEA's leadership, because these are some really phenomenal people that work in our school district. So I'm going to start with Zen and just let you introduce yourself.
I'm Zen again. I teach second grade at West Mercer.
I'm Danielle. I'm a paraeducator as well as a crossing guard at Northwood.
Samantha Mosley, second grade at Island Park.
Andy Yap, paraeducator, Island Park.
Jessica Olson, second grade teacher down at Linkage Elementary.
Sally Lozier on learning support this year at Northwood.
Alice Larkin, sixth grade language arts and drama.
Elizabeth Oval, a proud first grade teacher at Northfield. Laura Fitzgerald, Spanish teacher at the high school.
Craig Lottery, English teacher at the high school.
And for those of us,
Should we swing around this the way forward?
yes, we'll let you continue.
I'm Lucy. I'm the senior student board rep.
I'm gonna jump back to
I'm totally fine. Andrew's our technology director for the district.
Megan Tucker. I'm in my 7th year.
Julia Bradley, a new director.
Christina Martinez, third year.
Jody Lee, I'm on the 3rd year vice president. And Stephanie Burnett is our president. She's in her first year.
First year board member. Yeah. Nice to see you all.
There's a floating head.
I want to thank you again for having us at your linkage session. We would love to continue the conversation with you. We are available to have conversations. I hope you are as well. I think it will really help cement a positive relationship if we take the time to communicate with each other. Ask us questions. We're the people with our feet on the ground.
And the board will be at the high school next week for a site visit, the 5th, I believe. So looking forward to that opportunity to get over there and see the high school.
The last
See you at
thing,
lunchtime.
the last thing we would ask of you, if you are willing, we would love to take a picture with you to send to Representative Zahn, who is looking for reasons or support for the legislation that she's going to vote for. So if you're willing to do that, we would love to have a photo with you.
Can I add something related to that bill, if that's okay? I was at I was in Olympia like 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about that specific bill. And what I believe it's important is that we engage with our legislators and senators, well, the legislators, sorry, representatives and senators, that the funding of school is important. It's the paramount duty, period, because this bill, as stated, will be challenged at the Supreme Court, and we cannot have all our eggs on that basket that will fund education. So I think it is important to put it on the table, but I think that the state has to figure out a way to figure out how they're going to fund education and have more income. So that's pretty much what I want to say. So I just want to say that was a real concern for some of the school directors, that this will be voted down at Supreme Court because it might be considered unconstitutional. So
when I attended lobbying day on behalf of WEA and met with legislators mainly from our districts, that conversation, they're well aware of the long game and the expectation of, and other reiterations of what type of tax revenue and structure would go through. So there are multiple conversations going on, well aware there will be a constitutional challenge to it.
And I absolutely know. I just want to make sure that we are all aware, and the end game is pretty much that the state figured this out, because we need to be funded to make sure that the student needs are that we're funded by student needs, not headcount. And pretty much that's what we need, and be funded. So
right. Well, in that conversation, I'm asking, do you support? It was also what's your commitment to education and pre-K through higher ed, but that was asked of each of our legislators as we went in as WEA reps. So there's a lot of good data that WEA has collected on their support of education across the state.
Yeah. So in the absence of doing anything and expecting a different outcome, nothing will change. What we're looking for are ways to make people understand that change needs to happen. So that's our hope. Maybe
Yep.
this one won't pass, but if we keep lobbing things that direction, somebody might.
I am 100% on your side on that, and you know that I've been there. So.
Yeah.
What I would say on that is, when we go to recess, board members and everything can do whatever they want individually. Because we are in a board meeting and they haven't taken action on it, we can't, it would be putting them in an awkward position to commit to taking a picture as a board because of that technicality.
Disappointed, but acknowledged.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna call a recess. You guys have done concern? Yeah. Yeah, perfect. I'm gonna call a recess until 5:45. Right, they get, we're at 5:45, right?
PTA will be here at 5:45.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
like to take this back into session and take this opportunity to welcome our partners in volunteerism, the PTA Council, ably represented by Sarah and Debbie. Obviously, I think we all came up through the PTA jungle at some point on the board here. Not Maggie Teich doesn't interrupt, sorry. We've all, speaking as a former PTA Uber volunteer, I appreciate the hundreds of hours that you put in to help our schools run. And I know that our schools would not be able to run without the tireless work of parents, organizing programs, organizing fundraisers, advocating for schools, talking to our legislators, communicating with parents, communicating with children, providing cookies during finals. You name it, you guys do it. We appreciate you and your role in the district, and we look forward to the linkage sessions where we can hear your priorities for the year and fold them into when we try to consider our priorities for the year. So, you want to introduce yourselves? And
Yes, absolutely. And then,
yes, well, I was going to say and go around the table, but like obviously you know us also.
yes, but from an efficiency standpoint, I would be happy to jump in. But for those that were meeting for the first time, my name is Sarah Kareem. I'm currently the PTA Council President, and I am here with the President-elect, Debbie Nelson. And we also are former PTA presidents ourselves. Myself, I was at Linkage for 2 years as PTA president, and Debbie Nelson was at Northwood. We'll start off with just really wanting to appreciate and thank you all for your service. We thank you, Jody, for that shout out. And we'll welcome Julian and Stephanie to the board. Stephanie expressed that she would be able to be part of this meeting. Just appreciate all your presence and your committees. I know many of you, we serve on PAC and or in council with Jody. Just so that you have a pulse on what's happening in our communities and what's happening with our students and our families. This year, as like many years, we have a really active PTA community. We currently have 12 PTA presidents across 7 different systems. So a MIPA president, the 4 elementary schools, middle school, and the high school. And we want to really express our gratitude to all of our active board members that exist across all of their varying needs that we have across the systems. And we really appreciate all our principals as well, particularly those in the buildings that we work really closely in partnership with, because it truly is a partnership in contrast to some other districts, which is not the case as much. Just as a quick recap, the PTA Council had an unusual fall this past year where, due to the sexual allegations that had taken place, all 12 PTA presidents came together to work really collaboratively with each other, some didn't sleep for a couple of nights, to really synthesize a lot of the concerns that community members were bringing forward. I think we had over 900 individuals watch the webinar, and I really want to appreciate Fred, Dr. Rundle, for your partnership in responding to the needs of the PTA presidents to ask that we could have that session. And we have continued to get a lot of feedback and appreciation. And that was really something unusual, that we came together and worked so closely with each other and haven't had that opportunity in past PTA council. So that was just something unusual about our year in 2025. Our PTA advocacy reps would really like to express our gratitude to the school board on alleged matters, and with Julian and Christina, they really wanted to ensure that we carry forward that gratitude, and also to student reps Lucy and Brody and Christina Martinez for the January town hall with the incredible leadership that you showed in the session. Want to appreciate Fred, Fred and Matt for the roadshow. That has been really particularly helpful to understand the district's financial situation. And then something unusual also in 2025, just a note of appreciation to current director Christina Martinez and previous director Dan Glowitz for passing with the previous board resolution 739 when it came to supporting the educational students' rights of all students. We have had many parents reach out to us earlier this year asking about what they can do to feel more safe in our schools. And I really want to appreciate Fred and Ian for your work in putting up a website and resources with guidelines, because that just felt like very clear leadership for our community members in understanding how the school district
can help navigate what our community members are navigating with that particular situation. We reached out to our presidents who reached out to their communities in preparation for our session today. Some of them are calling in and couldn't be here in person. And we got a lot of opinionated perspectives and feedback for you. We're going to try and summarize the 7 or 8 issues that they raised or concerns. We're going to try our best to share some stories. So we'll have a couple of those bullet points. We'll have a couple of stories to highlight this, and expand upon those bullet points. There's some questions that come out of those issues, and then there's some recommendations. What we want to do is so that, because we're mindful of time, is that we want to see if we can then prepare this and then share this with you so you have it in order to look at after the meeting, just not now, because we were receiving feedback as late as like 1 p.m. this afternoon. I think we'll start off with the first one, and Debbie and I are going to try and take turns if possible, depending on if we can make sure that we can highlight all the different stories that were shared. This is not in order of importance. And I want to name here that PTA presidents feel that they really truly have that partnership where they're working with the school district. So they're working on these issues actively. But the reason that they want to bring it forward today is so that you as school board members have an awareness of some of the issues that they're working on, and that parents are bringing and family members are bringing forward to them. So this is, again, an appreciation shout out to our district partners and our building reps, our building principals that they're working closely in tandem with. And so we'll start out first, technology. Families across the middle school and increasingly elementary continue to raise persistent growing concerns about iPad usage and overall technology strategy by the school district. While many appreciate the improvements the district and IMS have made, the volume and consistency of this feedback signal that families are looking for greater clarity, urgency, and a more proactive, research-aligned approach to device use in learning, and with a specific focus on iPads. Implementing across elementary offerings that work at different elementary schools. So there has been a notice of disparities in policies between different elementary schools. A couple of examples that were raised, and we'll get into that in some of our impact stories. For example, 2 of our elementary schools have the Access for All Dyslexia Support Program, 2 other elementary schools do not. For example, there is different policies when it comes to recess in the different schools. For example, instruction blocks have been at West Mercer for 4 years. Lakewood just introduced them this year. So while parents that brought this forward, concern forward, named that there are elementary schools and other school districts that all function differently, there was a request that for programs that are working well in some of the elementary schools, can there be more of that learning across all 4 elementary schools for the programs that are working well, with the acknowledgement that there's a different ethos behind all the different elementary schools. Another issue or topic or concern was transparency in pathways for key subjects that sequentially start in elementary and or middle school and go through high school. Math is one of them. Spanish is another. The flash curriculum and sexual health is another, as well as how do IEPs and 504 transition works, what's the pathway. There was request for more transparency along that, and again, we'll get into it in terms of examples. Part of why this came about is that there was a notice in communication gaps where it felt that access to critical info, as far as these pathways are concerned, feels limited to families that may be in the know. And that includes some of us in PTA will know, hey, I decided on a meeting, this is the way that you want to do things and navigate those. And so there's an impact on equity. What does it mean for our families that are not familiar with the MISD system, or not familiar with the school system in Washington State, or new to the country? How do they navigate these pathways when they're not in the know, let alone those that don't speak English? So there's an equity piece on what it means to have access to knowledge about those pathways. And also similarly, actually, we heard about this from MIPA families as well, is what is the value that MISD provides? What does it look like to enter the school district? What can kindergarten students expect?
speaking of pathways, another piece was the request for stronger partnerships when it comes to transition. So families receiving are seeking earlier, more structured support for transitions from 5th to 6th and also from 8th to 9th, with a request for especially executive functioning support at the lower levels. The school bond. So concerns for what may be on the next bond. Will it pass? Given the last 2 bonds, both for the city and the school bond, did not pass this past year. And as far as student and well-being concerns, this was expressed in different ways, in the different levels. And really the overarching theme was who has the interests of students at heart. So at the elementary level, an example, and I'm getting into examples, this is the last topic, was what happens when there's a situation of disruption in the classroom and there's an evaluation period that's occurring. So for the 6 weeks that evaluation is occurring, what is the immediate support that the classroom is receiving while we're waiting for the results of that evaluation? And as far as the high school is concerned, similarly, there were some questions around when we had a situation where one of the educators was put on leave because there was an investigation happening. What was the immediate plan for support for what the students were navigating? And some families still feel that students have not been centered and want to be centered, if you will. Debbie, do you want to cover at least some examples? And I apologize that we're doing a lot of the talking, but we just want to have all the information and then be able to have a little bit of the conversation. So do you want to share some of the stories when it comes to at least technology as a starting point?
Yeah, so these are examples that illustrate the lived experience of our students and families within the district. And under technology, the first one, the ADHD digital loop. And parents of students with ADHD describe the iPad as addictive. They witness that their children are trapped in cycles of app switching, messaging through shared Google Docs, and multitasking that prevents them from starting their work. And there's the physical toll. Families report that eye doctors are expressing concern over premature eye strain. And parents are observing students are hunched over on floors whilst holding their iPads, inches from their faces, bypassing the ergonomic benefits of working at a desk. The filter pride. Students are proudly sharing that they have an ability to bypass some of the school filters to access non-academic content like shopping, sports betting, and adult content, which is leaving parents who limit tech at home feeling uneasy and unprotected. Then we have finger writing, particularly in math, and due to broken keyboards in grades 7, 8, coupled with a lack of styluses, students are completing complex math by writing with their fingers on a screen. Families have a grave concern that this undermines the cognitive benefits of handwriting and fine motor development. The juxtaposition principle. A student should be rewarded for understanding a concept like juxtaposition, not for copying the word from a search result. This highlights a gap where tech reliance can overshadow critical thinking. And then in terms of monitoring progress, there's a lack of visibility into daily, especially where math quizzes and assignments stay digital and don't come home.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just recalling, Debbie, at least one of the presidents had shared when they're talking about some of these stories was, is it about printing? And I'm going to actually transition and say, and Debbie, I'm thinking out loud, is that the recommendation that the community members and the presidents that brought this forward was, can we please reestablish a technology advisory board that includes educators, parents, and students to create a proactive research-aligned strategy that addresses addictive gamification and screen limits. And so as we share the examples, we also want to provide something for you to consider as a strategy. I know as school board members, you make the decision of what I know much of this from an operational perspective is under the remit of the superintendent. And I appreciate that you also set some policies. And so these are some requested recommendations that were coming out of the stories. I'll share quickly the story that was connected to our piece when we were talking about implementation across different offerings, particularly when we talk about dyslexia. So There were questions around families of students with dyslexia reporting feeling forced to leave the school district for specialized schools like Hamlin, especially without a clear timeline for the dyslexia pilot rollout, and some wait and see anxiety driving some of this enrollment. And similarly, when we talk about differentiation, for example, at one elementary school, you know, there is a decision that some students may get accelerated. Code 32, Code 33 is a differentiation that occurs in our school district as well. And at some elementary schools, acceleration is happening for some students. At other schools, it is not. The question that came up out of this is, there are two questions. One is that, can there be a policy that focuses on strengthening some of these programs that are successful, and some of these policies are successful across all 4 elementary schools? Because something that parents are coming and asking is there an intra-district transfer policy? If my child has dyslexia and it is only being offered at Northwood and I am zoned to another school, can my child attend Northwood? If there is, while there's some time that the rollout is being considered. So the presidents are being asked this question and they don't know what to say to the families that are coming to them with this question. So that's an example. So the recommendation was to essentially, where was this? That to be able to, as much as possible, to provide support for this collaboration between elementary schools so they can learn from success programs. Because ideally we don't want to have our families necessarily having to consider transfer unless we feel it's the only option. So that was one of the stories. I'll transition into the next one, the visibility void in math pathways. So not all educators have math work and tests coming home. And so this is also a variation across different schools. So some parents feel they don't have visibility into their math, the lack of clarity around Code 32, Code 33, how they work, how they read at middle school, the timing and process for math acceleration. So for example, some presidents are aware that in order to have reach calculus in high school, which is a critical requirement for admission to Tier 1 and Tier 2 universities, you have to at least accelerate once in the school district. Not many community members know that. And so what does that look like when kids who are accelerating, how can they be supported to remain on the acceleration path, and or their families whose kids are showing readiness, what does that look like, particularly when it's impacting college admissions? And so that's where elementary and middle school parents are thinking about what does that look like. I will say it's just that when it comes to pathways, just having opportunities for that connection point between the different elementary, middle, and high schools would be really, really helpful. Here I will give an example of how, when it came to understanding offerings in the middle school, the Linkage principal, for example, in January, upon request of the PTA president, had a linkage session where they offered for parents and families a connection point with the middle school principal. Now, this was unusual because usually this happens later in the year, like April, May. However, what happened in January, over 40 parents participated, including 4th grade parents. So that's where we noticed that there is a demand for parents wanting to learn as to what's happening in the next level. And I really, really appreciated that our community that was at Lakewood really appreciated that connection point. So can we do more of that? Can there be more connection and strengthening of different transition supports? Lastly, the other example that was shared was with the centering of students piece. At the high school level, there is a community of parents that have noted that there's a student safety and wellbeing committee. What they also want to acknowledge is that this committee is providing recommendations. So what does implementation look like? What does accountability look like? When that happens, because consultants, by nature of the work they do, is provide recommendations and then they come and it has to be implemented. So where does that support look like within the school district? And is the school district being provided that implementation support? And because that is a ways away, how do students who are currently feeling underrepresented and unresolved, how are they being supported while the results of the consulting is being considered? And this was similar to the elementary example that we gave of while the 6 weeks of evaluation is occurring, what does it mean in the moment for kids that are in the classroom when there is disruption that's occurred? I think we covered a lot of the different stories. We couldn't get into many of them because we want to have a conversation, but I just want to elevate the different recommendations. And again, we will try our best to actually share this in a document. I'm going to just list them out. So providing implementation support to the buildings to incorporate recommendations of presidium work with the Student Wellbeing and Safety Committee, as well as support to the classrooms at the elementary and middle level when disruption occurs. Receiving community input on the bond, on the elements for consideration for both the bond and the levy without having to commit to months of meetings. Reestablishing a technology advisory board that includes multiple stakeholders, establishing a math pathways advisory committee comprising of math educators and different parents at the different levels. Also, different pathway committees essentially for the different curriculums if possible. We recognize that our educators and our staff have so much on their plate, so parents are willing to participate to help and PTA members. Executive functioning and alignment, creating a district-wide executive functioning framework that brings in elementary school and coordinates transitions through middle and high school. So this was as far as transitions are concerned. And essentially really being able to help provide trainings to educators across many different realms that they need support in, that PTA is looking to. Debbie, I did a lot of talking. Is there anything else that we're forgetting? We tried to prep the best that we could based on all the feedback that we received. Okay, thank you. And now we'll open up to discussion. That was a lot.
So can we start with tech? I think that will, because I know that there's always this conversation about technology, and I'm always, there's two things, right? Like what is being implemented at this moment and what is coming our way. So those conversations are in tension because that's the reality. And also the reality is that I think that the perception of the parents on how much iPad is used during the classroom, I'm not talking about home, it is less than it's perceived. But in the middle school, the tier 1, you can talk more about that, right? Yes.
And I'm serving on the tier 1 team at the middle school. And at not our most recent meeting, but the one prior to that, Andres and his team came in to talk about technology. And it was actually an incredibly helpful meeting because it was both high level and nitty gritty of like, what is the educational purpose of technology and how can my child get to this specific website for shopping that I don't want them to? And so I actually thought that that was very helpful. And I could see the use of a technology advisory committee that kind of works with Andres on a regular basis to talk about technology, some of both the high level educational value of technology and then the nitty gritty of my kids are using it in this way that is not appropriate. Because I think that question of technology is going to continue to be with us for a long time, probably forever. I was doing some research on AI and I came across a quote that I thought was very good, is that, part of the learnings of education is the journey that we go on, not just getting the answer. And so to the extent that you can just dump your information into ChatGPT and get an answer, that's not actually the journey of education. And so coming up with a good strategy, and I think that the work that Andres did with the tier 1 team at IMS was sort of excellent. And I would encourage us to figure out a way to incorporate that more into what the community would like.
I think our tag over time, thinking about, technology advisory group has evolved and morphed. And if I go back to some of the early days of it, it was the push to get to be one of the first one-to-one iPad districts in the state. And that was a big push. In fact, we became an Apple distinguished program, and that was a huge thing. They came out, did a big celebration. And I think we're seeing now, where as we evolve, what are the tension? How do we move through that? And so, I know that the tag was helpful with shaping our AI framework when we were putting that together.
Yeah,
So
we have had the tag, the technology advisory group over the years. Around 2022, we shifted to a work group that focused on AI values. But as I've been having more conversations with PTSAs, in other meetings and that here from parents, I do think there's a strong desire to bring that back up. It's generally run more around some of the levy renewals, looking at that, but that is my desire as well. Like that's our intent, is to restart the tag, and maybe potentially focus on several subgroups. And when we think about technology, there's a lot of topics to cover there. AI becomes, a portion of that. So maybe there's a larger technology group, advisory group, and then subgroups that focus on maybe some of the other categories, so that we can get really, in depth on some of those categories and not get lost in some of the minutia of just the overall, concerns there. So I do think that we'll start to take that.
Yeah, and I just want to, something that I actually didn't appreciate was we use the word technology very loosely, but the specific concern that's coming on is iPad usage. Sure. And for example, I think there was one president that shared broken keyboards, right, in 7th grade, 8th grade, right? And so what does it mean to have implementing more paper-based expectations? The impact that we talked about with some of our kids that have ASD or ADHD, there's a delay in being able to navigate executive functioning because of the gamification specifically for iPads. And so that's where some of that urgency was coming in of, that I also didn't appreciate when I first started getting this feedback. It's like, oh, technology, like we're talking computers, we're talking AI, but there was something very specific about that component, about using apps on the iPads. That was the most urgent request for that was coming up from the parents.
Sorry, excuse me. Sarah, can you give an example of like a situation where that would be a challenge for a kiddo with, say, like ADHD?
Well, do you want to share? I mean, I'm just thinking of the different examples you and I talked about. Is there anything you wanted to?
That if they post the link to YouTube and their Kahoot, they could get to any video they want and watch anime all day long.
I see. Okay,
so that's for sure. And Julie, so that's just one example, but the way that it was explained to me when I was collecting the feedback was that when you have ADHD, you have the ability to quickly go through and swipe through and go through the apps. So you're constantly, and when there's a gamification happening, the dopamine impact of what a child is experiencing is different, right? And so I am not going to be able to share, like, there were just multiple examples shared. I don't know if that's helpful.
Sure.
But
Just like it's difficult for any of us on our phones to like get on there and do what we're supposed to do because we're like, oh, and look, and this, and it's shiny and colorful.
I think that one of the parents shared the addiction that's happening. They're just saying is that our child is going to school, and because they're having the iPad usage at school, it's so much harder for implement a policy for us at home in order to wean them off that addiction. Right. And that is a different thing than navigating computers in that way, in the way that this parent was explaining.
And it's not really possible to opt out because like if the assignment is being done in a format where you need to use your iPad to do the assignment, like you can't just like say, I don't like it. Originally it was sort of a more optional thing, and it's not really optional anymore. I will say though that when we visited the middle school, I did see just some fantastic instances of how they were using that technology, like this math program that they were sort of trialing that was like a pilot program where it matched students based on where they were in their understanding of like this new math concept, and like put them working together where one student taught a concept to the person they were matched with, and the kids were able to say, they were able to list people they didn't want to work with or people that they did want to work with, and the system kind of like worked to match person. And I was like, you couldn't do that without an iPad. So
well, without technology,
without some sort of, could be a laptop.
And I think that's the feedback where, like, there are those, we have private schools that do not have technology, right? In fact, in one of our parent, like, online groups.
I just saw that.
Yeah, you saw that. So, and again, so this is a conversation that's happening in the ether amongst many different community members, which is why probably the PTA presidents brought it forward to us. But there is a no technology piece, and then there is, a broad, like, let's use technology for everything. And when I looked at the spectrum in terms of the feedback that we got, it was saying, the presidents that we spoke to were not saying no technology. They were saying there's a usage for technology, but can we have a research-based strategy behind it? Because there was a strategy 10 years ago of what we're going to do with it. And now all of this research is coming out that's indicating a certain impact, and we're not responding to it with an urgency that allows us to be ahead of the game. Not that that's a bad expression.
Thinking
I am watching out for our kids and the impact it has on their
And I
lives.
would love two things. One is your opinion as a student. How do you see technology? Because you went through iPad and then computer. And I will let you talk first, and then I will give my opinion on what I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to me to kind of push back against technology. Kind of because I feel like in elementary school I didn't see any, I guess, downside to it, or I feel like in school and its usage in the classroom, and from what I saw in our middle school site visits and stuff, it is very reasonable. You know, I remember we went into a number of classrooms and only a few of them were using technology. It's not, I don't think it's permeating with every aspect of everything. You know, when you're going to go home and do homework, it's going to be primarily on your computer or your iPad, but when you're in school, it's going to be less. So I think there is a little bit of that bias that happens where, I think as Jody said, like parents perceive there to be more technology use in school than there actually is. And I think also that it's important that we do have technology and that we teach kids those skills and how to manage that. You know, a kid with ADHD is going to have to learn how to use technology because it's going to be in their lives. You know, none of us go through work and never use a computer and never have to manage that. And so the more that we can give kids that experience and help them learn and make mistakes when they're young and maybe, you know, get distracted in class and do stuff like that, and then when they're in high school, they can build up skills and manage that. And if there's some way that we can help kids do that better and learn how to manage technology better, I think that would be wonderful, because that's such an important skill that they're always going to need to have throughout their life.
Can you add in, I'm curious, I don't think I asked this in this way. You have been part of the transition from iPads in the high school to the laptops. Was that noticeable, not a big deal, like, you know, in terms of technology and use in the classroom? Any insights there, Lucy? Because were you a freshman or maybe a sophomore?
I was a sophomore.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think for at least in the high school, especially, the laptops are much better. You know, you have a computer, you have like, it's bigger, it just works better. You could do more with it. But it's not necessarily difficult. I think the most important skill that a lot of people didn't learn as well with the iPads, especially since we didn't have as many of like the attached keyboards as I think we do now, is typing. That's a really, really important skill. And a lot of people I remember really don't know how to type very well coming into it because they've been typing on their iPad for so long. But I think it was a pretty good transition for most people.
So I'm just interested because your question and what I ask, I'm thinking about as a parent, right? The transition from my 8th grader to be a 9th grader, on how they use the technology, they focus a lot more on the computer. The iPad was something that really, I could see that problem of just going from one place to another. And I'm curious if it's just that my kid matured, or that if you, like, there's a way that we can do, I'm a researcher by nature, so that we can see like 9th graders, and especially those with HDD, that have that issue that had it in the previous year, do they do better in computers or not? And if that's the case, maybe see if computers will work better for those kids in middle school, or it's just a maturity thing. Like, there's a way that we could see those 9th graders and 8th graders, which is a transition, and I see a difference. Yeah, they go and focus, do their homework, close it, and they prefer to go to their phone. And in the past, it was everything on the iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's, I don't know.
Can I just touch on that point? Yeah. Just my own experience with my son who's transitioned from 5th grade to 6th grade. He now has access to an iPad all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, that has changed his behavior towards iPads. And he now thinks he has access to an iPad at home all the time. And we've seen him sort of sneaking his iPad and hiding it away. So we're having to take it away from him completely to try and change that behavior. And I put it down to now the fact that he has this iPad on him all the time at school, whether he's using it or not. In his mind, he has the right to go and use it when he wants. And so we're having to manage that. And then secondly, because of the time spent on a screen, he does get migraines. And so last week, he's being back in school after a week off. First 2 days, he's come home with migraines. And I think that's because he's been on his iPad as well. So I think there were
and
other aspects.
I think this is where I just want to appreciate that we often use that interchangeably, iPad and technology. And again, this is where I'm seeing the concern that's being brought forward is specifically with the nature of iPads. There's one story that a parent president shared with us is as an example that's different than a computer, that in the middle school, students are taking photos of peers using the iPad. And then while there's a no phone policy, when you have an iPad being used and then being used to impact social dynamics as far as bullying is concerned, it's a different type of device than technology in the classroom as high school is. And so just wanting to name, the example, Debbie, that you read out of like using fingers to do math. You cannot do that on the computer, right? You use a mouse to do it. And the fingers on the mat are replacing written ways that kids are learning and how they're dealing with answering.
I would just add, and Andrew, maybe this is something that you guys can talk about when you reform the TAG group, is being around when iPads were implemented. One of the main reasons was to help for a lot of students solve those executive functioning challenges, the notebooks that flew open, the inability to find things, everything was, teachers would upload it to a site and things like that. So maybe that's not the right tool anymore to use, but one of the reasons was to try to put things in one repository where people could go find it. I agree, and being a middle school principal for a lot of times, that the iPad has been repurposed for nefarious reasons in some ways, and it does cause some addiction. And we have worked with some success on educating parents on some things they can do at home when there are those battles. But I do think it probably is a good time to look at, is that the right tool for the right purpose? Even as deep as, is Schoology still the right tool? And I know Schoology goes into the high school. You might have an opinion on that, but is the tool matching the desire still? It did 10, 12, whatever we did it 15 years ago, whatever that was. Is it still the right tool for the right purpose?
Yeah. And I want to name that for some students, particularly that are using like heavily reliant assistive technologies, the iPads are absolutely essential to their learning. And again, this was not to take it away entirely, although I think one parent did provide that feedback and complimented Fred on, MISD has a no phones policy. Can we have a no technology policy? But I just want to name that it is absolutely an instrument and a tool that's helpful to some students in our population. And the request is to consider the over reliance on it. And especially when you talk about transition, right? Like fifth graders, they're using it very differently. And thank you, Lucy, for bringing that forward. That in elementary, it's less usage. In middle school, it's significantly more. One parent responded and said that I've actually requested for my students' technology use to be tracked. And I'm noticing even more than I had thought. And then, but we're increasingly seeing it. We had incoming kindergarten parents that were told by other parents, if you walk in, you might see your kids in the school visits on iPads. And unfortunately, that's the reality of what they experience. So there has been a greater introduction of it. But what does that look like from a transition period? And that support from the executive functioning piece has been, sorry, I mean, you've had your hand up for something.
No, I just actually had a question just in terms of the feedback you got, because what I've been hearing is a lot about the use outside of school, because I do have the luxury of being in all of elementary through middle schools. I'm a district level person, so I able to see sort of the iPad at that level being used regularly. And my observation, at least in school, is that the school-based technology tends to be it's intentionally designed. It seems to be used for a purpose in the classroom when I'm observing that, and they're accessing tools that seem to function different. It's not trying to think of, it's not a video game where there's Clash of Clans or whatever it is. They're not necessarily, it's just not passive digestion of content, which is what I see, which with my own kids, I see outside of school. So my question is there concern about the use of the technology in the school setting, or the consequence of then having access to the device at home, where it's less time bound, there's less is less task-oriented use and there's less supervision. So that's one of my questions with respect to that, because most of what I see is there tends to be clear instructional purpose for why they're using it to some of the things that you mentioned.
I think the answer is both.
Yeah.
It's the quantity of time being spent during school hours and the impact of what that leads to after school as well. And it's also, so there is a quantity, it's the bypassing of certain protocols that's been set up, et cetera. So it's a plethora of different things that are happening. And I think, and I want to name is that, you know, we have PTSA, is that there are some teachers that provided this feedback as well. Like, what's the overall strategy behind what we're trying to do from a technology perspective? That was at least one, you know, feedback that was collected by our president. So I don't know if it's limited entirely to parents and students.
Yeah, but I'm saying based on the feedback is,
yeah.
And then my other question is, you mentioned a couple times in your request for, I guess you referenced it as TAG, but to implement a research-based implementation of technology. Did you have examples of what you were thinking of, or where you feel this has been done well? I mean, that's basically my question, because I think there's been a lot of research that's gone into adopting, for example, Schoology. There's a lot of time spent looking at the various tools. Well, I just happened to watch that process unfold over 10 years. So just what does that look like? I mean, or if you have examples we can look to.
I will say is that I did receive, and there was a lot of appreciation that at least middle school PTA and advocacy and SATLET all have met with you at different points. Those groups have all been meeting with Andres. We have specific examples of what they were thinking about. But the overall question for school board was, it used to exist as a committee. It no longer exists. Can we revive it?
Yeah,
and so I
understand
don't know,
the committee.
I don't know if Andres, if examples came up in the conversations that you've been in with those different groups.
You know, I think when we think about research, there's been more research around the physical applications. So, you know, I heard a little bit about migraines, you know, eyesight, other things like that. We had some conversations around those reverse learners, and so you know, if you go back there, you know, I fully agree. 3 years ago, when we did our device review at the high school, and we looked at making the switch from iPads to laptops, it was really around our 4Bs when we were barriers. And when we look at barriers, I didn't want to focus on the instruction, the tool itself and the technology, but really more of the instructional practices and the outcomes. So when we think about how we review our technology use, it really should be focused on the educational aspect of it, right? Not the logo, the actual device itself, but really what are our students being asked to do? What are our teachers need our students to be able to do? And then what are those barriers that exist? When we went through the last device review, it was shortly after COVID. We did some of our surveys before COVID, and then shortly after COVID. So, you know, as we think about access to full-size keyboards, larger screens, some of that feedback came through students being online on Zoom, you know, shifting between there. We actually did a similar survey at our middle school at that time as well, because I felt like if we were identifying those barriers at our high school, perhaps maybe those barriers exist in middle school as well. And at that time, we did survey our staff and our students in reviewing instructional practices. And this was 2022, 2023, when we made that shift. We're now in our third year with both the laptops at the high school. At that time, they felt like the iPads were the appropriate tool. I will say, just in the last, say, 4 months, right, there was a congressional hearing in led by one of the senators from Texas that really, you know, focused on this. So there's a national conversation that I think is raising a lot of awareness. And so I am hearing a lot more of it in the last 4 months. And even in that time, as I've met with the tier 1 groups, the PTSAs, the SALAD groups, I think we've made a lot of changes. We've gone through and reviewed our content filtering categories to help address some of those concerns. We've made shifts to what services students have access to at home. So we mentioned Kahoot, for example, GimKit, primarily at the middle school, because I would agree with that. When we hear this feedback, we are hearing quite a bit of it from our middle school groups in particular. So we spent a lot of time just in classrooms and the lunchroom observing and seeing, you know, how our students utilize the devices when they are off task. What tools are they accessing, or sites and services? And is it a failure in our content filtering system? Is there additional restrictions that we can put in place, or is there something else that we can do? And one thing that we found is and I think I heard a little bit about it, is just sort of gamification. So if you take a tool like GimKit, for example, GimKit is a tool that helps with practice, fluency. Our teachers are utilizing it. However, because of that gamification that we've been seeing in that industry, there are a lot of games within that tool. We surveyed our teachers around how they utilize that tool and what value they see in that tool. And there was some strong feedback from our teachers that they do utilize that tool to help support student learning with that practice. So one shift that we made to help support parents is we allow GameKit access at school and block it outside of the school hours. So it's about 15 minutes before the school day and about 15 minutes after the school day, GameKit will be blocked. Because as I think about the experience that and the stories that parents have shared with us, I can certainly understand that if they're seeing students gaming on GameKit, right, that can be very challenging. And unfortunately, that's one of the tools that does also provide educational access. So just trying to make those adjustments. I also heard you mention keyboards as well, in several cases, and I will fully, I always try to be as transparent and honest as possible. We have had some issues with supply chain. However, after the last IMS PTSA meeting, we have sent out several messages on Schoology, letting students know that if their keyboard isn't working, we have gotten another shipment in. So if their keyboard isn't working, please come to the tech office. Because our goal is to absolutely provide them with technology and devices that are meeting their needs. We have also done stylus sets. We don't do individual stylus for each students, but we have done stylus sets in many classrooms. So I think the math tool that you're referring to is ClassKit, that they utilize for that. In various cases, some teachers have written grants and said, I see this benefit, and we've done, grade level sets of stylus. Our laptops actually come with a stylus in the docking station. So I can, see what you're describing there. We are actually currently going through a device review at our high school and continuing to look to see, especially as we make that shift from, and Lucy will test this, we had a BYO program. And what we saw was a lot of our juniors and seniors were bringing in their own devices. Some of those devices, and I know you mentioned the ADHD and the distraction element, even laptops come with distractions, right? As I think about technology, there's so much impact and benefit that we can have with technology. And then there's also that opportunity for them to access sites and services that can be distracting. And so as you think about like MacBooks, for example, they had iMessage on them and going through that. And so one shift we did make earlier this year as well is to mimic the phone-free schools policy and go to what we're calling a district provided device policy. So students are utilizing the district provided device where we can put more control, a little bit more classroom management and monitoring piece in there to help ensure that they're accessing educational resources. And then there's additional changes that we're making through feedback from me with parents through various conversations to help make sure that we're addressing the needs. And one thing that I've been sharing is, and you've described this as well, right? There's that spectrum of families who, potentially might feel like, no, we want to remove all technology and vice versa. Trying to avoid a lot of those extremes and those large swings, and really kind of focusing in and helping to ensure that the technology is supporting our student learning, but then also addressing, concerns that our parents are sharing or that our staff are sharing about off-task behavior. And then as Lucy, alluded to there is that gradual release of responsibility that happens as they transition between kindergarten to 12th grade, where you see less technology use in K1, K1-2, right? As with our youngest learners, you might see a little bit more in 3, 4, or 5 as we start teaching them a little bit more executive function skills, that collaboration, that productivity, and that creativity, right? Because our focus is on not passive use of technology, but active use of technology, right? So not just consuming materials, but actually creating and using those critical thinking skills and those skills to develop and demonstrate their learning. And then, as you mentioned, that transition between 5th and 6th grade, there is that piece where they go from classroom sets of iPads to that individual iPad. And I can totally understand what you're talking about, that can be a rough transition for a kid, right? When they have that device. So, your feedback is very, heard right through that. And we see, and I have heard that from parents that, 6th grade can be rough and then it gets a little bit better, 7th and 8th. We're also doing additional supports between those transitions because that is a conversation that teaching and learning have all the time. So this year we've implemented an additional restriction on our ninth graders to help ease that transition between 8th, 9th, and 10th, where it can help reduce some of the access that they have. So we're continuing to hear that feedback, make adjustments. And then in terms of the technology advisory group, I definitely think that's, I definitely see that there's a strong desire for that opportunity to continue to provide that feedback. And we want that partnership with our families, with our key stakeholders. And we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our community.
I realize we're really limited on time at this point, but can I just say one more thing about the screen addiction? Because I absolutely hear those concerns. Like, I have a 7th grader myself. We grapple with this all the time. I think that maybe, and I apologize if this is already happening in the middle school and I'm just not aware of it, but maybe it's something that needs to be addressed kind of like as the kids are getting these devices for the first time in 6th grade. Maybe there's some kind of like preventative educational stuff that can be done in terms of like, like the value of having a part of your day where you do not have access to any devices at all. They like when you're, and it's about home activity, not just school activity. I just met a spinal surgeon a month ago who told me that he's having patients come in their 20s now for this particular type of like disc replacement surgery in their neck, that he had never seen that happen before. And he thinks it's because of young people being like hunched over, their phones mostly, like starting in high school. And that this used to be a surgery for people in their 50s, 60s, and beyond. And now it's like 20s and 30s. So like, wearing my OT hat for a minute here, like it would be great to have it be part of what the kids are taught about technology is like ergonomics, and to like kind of have a tech buddy who says, hey, look here, like don't hold your neck like that, like this makes me crazy at home when my own child is sitting on the couch like this, So just another way of approaching it is also through that sort of like physical health and kind of habit.
And just to like, I don't know if you have, we could go on all day, but just to button it real quick, I wonder, I guess, if parents have an accurate idea, an accurate picture of how much technology is being used in the class. Like what they see is, I see it at home, and it's obviously a bother there. It's about anyone who has a child and has any device knows about the struggles there. But when we've done site visits in schools, and when I've seen the site visits in schools, what I have seen is what Maggie Tai was talking about, like a little bit of the sort of like the leveling of different levels of ability, being able to work together on the same concepts, without differentiating who has which level, which I think is especially important. We've seen that in our elementary school, and we've seen that in our middle school, where students are able to work on the same concepts without having to disclose who gets the, smart level and who they be working more. And also one of the things that really struck me in our last school visit was I saw students working in their native languages on the iPad, on the same concepts for math and science. And so like they didn't have to, the information was presented in whatever language they needed to be presented in to be their most effective student selves. And I think that's something that maybe people who are reminiscing fondly about their own school experiences that were tech-free, or have, been opinions on what works best for their kid, might not be taking into account what works best for every student that we have, which is to learn most effectively maybe in their own language or at their own ability, and not feel at all outgrouped by what their ability is. And I hear your very valid concerns. I mean, we've all had them. But what I see in our schools is there's sort of a very thoughtful and limited use of technology, and the way that it can really help our students achieve their best. But I have to say, like, not in the classroom that much, like I'm not seeing, the sort of like all day tech reliance that I'm hearing about from parents. And I'm wondering if they're really getting an accurate picture, or if they're sort of, as we all do, once you have a Volvo, you see Volvos everywhere kind of view of it.
Can I, and then I will help transition to a different topic. I'm curious from a epidemiology perspective, if we are able to, like, through the nurses or the schools, see how many kids miss school or are picked up like headaches and migraines, and if we can track it back to see if there's a correlation. Not necessarily because maybe the parents also need to provide blue glasses, the blue ray, I don't know, those type of, so there might be something there, and that might be easy to track that way. And also with the ergonomics, I think that there's a great opportunity because when we put a bomb, see this kind of transition into the bomb, that the desk and the chairs that we provide in the next building are thought on that perspective too. So now we can talk about that. So, yes.
So sorry. 5 minutes. Is there anything else you wanna?
Oh, I mean,
I'm really sorry.
no, I mean, this is partially why I took the time in the beginning, Debbie and I, to go through all the bullet points. I mean, we do, and we started with, this is no order of importance, because I think and Fred, we've had this conversation with you. For different parents, different things are very important, and priorities will vary. Clearly, this was a conversation that all of us naturally went to, but there are other questions, and what we would like to do is actually, share this with you and ask all of you to consider the other topics as well, and see what are things that the district can prioritize based upon your recommendation or in collaboration with Fred. Of course, they have all the different insights than we do as a lived experience community.
And I would say that each one of these topics could have taken an hour of conversation. So
Yeah,
I think that would just
yeah,
like this,
absolutely. And some things are, and that's where I don't envy your job, but part of your role is to be able to facilitate. These are all the different topics. And again, with Fred, this is part of your role is in what you do, Fred, of like, where do you find the support to be able to support the students where they most need it? And different communities of students need different things.
And I would say that, for example, once you send that information, also there's others like the safety committee that we are under the work right now, that it will be easier for us to thread in our conversations, while the technology advisory board might look different because it has to form again. So those will be kind of implemented in different ways once we all discuss. In
Right. And
ways.
the question was different for that committee, which is just like, hey, there's some time. What's happening in the now?
So
right. So if the consultant's noticing gaps, what does that mean for our students if the gaps are currently existing? How do we address those? Because our students' needs being met in that way.
And I think this conversation tonight really shows the value of having these linkage sessions with the PTA and with all the work that you guys put into to gathering the information and gathering the opinions of your members and just bringing us the parent concerns. I don't think the parents are particularly shy about contacting their school board members when they have concerns, but I think that some are, and I think it's really important that you provide that their avenue for us to hear what our parents and our PTA presidents are thinking. So I really appreciate you taking the time and also doing all that thoughtful work that you did beforehand, obviously, to gather information and really hone out the 7 or 8 issues that are most important to your constituency.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for all the work that you do in serving impacts. Because I'm sure you hear snippets of this in different ways. But what I also really appreciate about this linkage session is this is our first and last opportunity to meet all of you at the same time. And so just really it's wonderful to be able to be in conversation with you and community with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very short time.
Yeah.
Feels
Okay, so board friends, now we are moving on to monitoring the superintendent performance. And what we do need to do sort of logistically is, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Is to find the district in compliance with monitoring the superintendent. And then we're going to the summer evaluation and the letter that, his superintendent's letter and a chance to weigh in on that and to provide feedback on that will be at the March 12th meeting because we don't have a complete board here tonight. And so I think that's what it was about. So what we do need to do is to find, I'm not going to lead the vote, but right now we'll vote on finding the district in compliance with the superintendent's report with the understanding that this, letter and the narrative evaluation will occur at the March 12th meeting. Does that sound accurate?
Yep. Essentially, the approval is that you are finding the superintendent in compliance with the expectations that you set forth a year ago. essentially then noting that there's a satisfactory evaluation. And then at the 12th meeting, as Director Lee has stated, that'll be your chance to really, I think, present the narrative behind, a little bit of the backdrop for why.
So, the summary of evaluation, is in our board docs. I don't know if we want to go through it piece by piece, or if we could just, does anybody have anything that they'd like to add about that? And it's, board policy 1605, which is under the board superintendent relationship. It's the annual summative evaluation of superintendent.
So the action item is accepting the.
Right, to find that we are in compliance.
Yeah, you're approving 1605.
And that's that last item. The superintendent has reasonably interpreted and operated within the boundaries established by the OEs as stated in board policy 1800.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
So,
I move to find us in compliance with board policy 1605.
second. Okay, so Julian moves and Christina seconds. Student?
Aye.
Board? Aye. 1040. Thank you guys very much. And with that, do I get a little motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
All right. Adjourn. Thank you very much. So what is that? 21 minutes for evaluation.
Yes, you can be around.